Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Let's start today's video with an update on GLSDB. GLSDB stands for Ground Launch Small Diameter Bomb. And here on the channel, I've been occasionally mentioning this weapon system for the last 10 months. This article is from November of last year, in which this idea was first floated of sending Ukraine GLSDB. It took a couple months for the US government to negotiate the contracts with Boeing and Saab. The money was allocated in February. And for the last 6 months, Boeing and Saab have been working on GLSDB. So what is it? It's a small diameter bomb. It says small, but it's 93 kilograms, fitted with a deployable wing kit. It's GPS guided and very accurate, up to 1 meter. It's launched from HIMARS and M270 with these attached rocket motors. So the beauty of GLSDB, one, the range, 150 kilometers. This is twice the range of the current Gimlers fired from HIMARS. But it's also cheap. The United States has tens of thousands of these small diameter bombs and tens of thousands of these rocket motors. Boeing and Saab had the idea of, let's take this cheap component and this cheap component and put them together. So the estimated per unit cost of each one of these missiles is about $50,000 US. Compare that to an ATACMS missile, which is over 1 million. Would you rather have 20 of these that can go 150 kilometers or a single ATACMS that can go 300? So this is what the Pentagon has been working on. This is what Boeing and Saab have been working on. And we did get an update in June, so this was 3 months ago, that there was going to be a delay in the delivery. GLSDB won't make Ukraine combat debut until this fall. Well, it's September 3rd. I think in Ukraine they do consider this the beginning of fall. But if you want to get super technical, the autumn equinox is on September 22nd. Here in the United States, that is the first day of fall. So my hope, my prayer, is that GLSDB will start arriving by this time next month. Let's go ahead and say October 3rd. I'm being very optimistic. I hope Boeing and Saab can come through, and tens of thousands of these can start being delivered to rain down on Russian positions. Here's a tweet from Benjamin Tallis that I want to share with you guys. A small point on language with some big implications. The war is not dragging on. Ukraine is fighting desperately for its survival and to liberate its people from Russia's brutality and oppression. We are dragging it out by not giving Ukraine what it needs to win as soon as possible. In the arsenals of all these Western democracies, we have all the weapons and tools to defeat Russia if we just give them to Ukraine. It's been an incremental process the last 18 months, testing those red lines from Russia. What if we give them this? What if we give them this? Hopefully, with the F-16s arriving in the beginning of 2024, we can stop talking about Russia's BS red lines. Another weapon system that was just announced are going to be AMRAAMs. These are aircraft-fired missiles with a range of 160 to 180 kilometers. And these are air-to-air missiles to go after Russian helicopters and Russian aircraft. Now, the same conditions might apply, and the West might tell Ukraine not to use these missiles on the territory of Belarus and Russia. But when it comes to the occupied territories, it covers most of it, so these are going to be no-go zones for Russian planes and helicopters if Ukraine can get air-to-air missiles with a 180-kilometer range. The only caveat to this news is, what are these AMRAAMs going to be fired from? Are they going to provide an adapter for old Soviet aircraft to fire these, or is this just an announcement that Ukraine is going to get these once they have F-16s at the beginning of next year? We'll find out. Russian regions targeted in fresh wave of drone attacks. Ukraine is increasing production of their own domestically produced drones to go after Russian targets. Because Ukraine is producing them themselves, they're free to use these on targets inside of Russia. And just in general, every update video I make for you guys now, these attacks are continuous on Russian positions inside of Russia and in the occupied territories. Explosions were reported in Berdyansk. We don't really have any good pictures or videos. Explosions were reported in Henichesk. We don't have any good pictures or videos. Explosions were reported in Tokmak. We don't really have any good pictures and videos. It's getting harder and harder with the situation on the ground for Ukrainian citizens to film Russian losses and then get them onto the internet. But here's an interesting video of a strike in the Luhansk region. This was a Russian refueling base, and it looks like Ukraine successfully destroyed a dozen or so Russian military fuel trucks.
Сегодня ночью прилетели к нам ракеты. Вот все, что осталось от завоза. Что первая бригада должна сократить. Да не немножко. Хорошо. Пацаны прям заживо погорели. Разом. Вот в этом кразе пацан сгорел. Заживо. Вот все, что осталось от него.
The Russian military, the Russian war machine, continues to take horrendous losses every day in multiple locations from these Ukrainian drone and missile attacks. Russia says they destroyed 3 Ukrainian drone boats targeting the Crimean Bridge. The rumors is that the drone boats were actually targeting a ship protecting the bridge. It wasn't successful this time, but there's always tomorrow night with a fresh batch of kamikaze drone boats. Ukrainian behind-the-lines operations responsible for punishing strike deep inside Russia, according to Budanov, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence, has said clandestine operators deep inside Russia ran the recent drone raid on a Kremlin airfield that burned 4 big military cargo jets. So this was the attack at the Pskov airbase near Estonia. Moments of drone strike that destroyed Russian Ilyushin 76s, seen in infrared image. So this is just the Ukrainians messing with the Russians. One, these drones were successful. They took video. They got that video back to Ukrainian intelligence. And Budanov decided to release the video just to mess with the Russians. So if you haven't seen it yet, once again, infrared of the drone drop on the Ilyushin 76 Russian aircraft at the Pskov airbase. This is incredible that Ukraine has this capability and the Russians are so vulnerable. Ukraine's intelligence also released a test video of what these drones they're sending into Russia look like. These drones are not taking off from Ukrainian territory. They're also definitely not taking off from the Baltics. They're being smuggled into Russia, probably in component pieces, being assembled by operatives inside the country, driven close to these Russian air bases, and then they're targeting these very important planes. You can see the drone basically detonates over the target, spraying shrapnel everywhere. All you have to do is punch a hole in the fuselage or hit the fuel tank, and yeah, these planes are going to need extensive repairs that will take money and time. So how is Ukrainian intelligence getting their operatives inside of Russia? And this is a crazy story. They could just be taking the bus. There are still buses from Kyiv to Moscow, and Ukrainians are still using them. Many of the passengers boarding Moscow-bound buses from over a dozen Ukrainian cities are doing so without getting their passports stamped by Russian border guards. Now, when you ask somebody getting on a bus from Kyiv to go to Moscow, why are you doing it? Most people genuinely are doing it to see family. Lots of people have family ties between Russia and Ukraine. But to get on a bus to go from Kyiv to Moscow, it costs $350 in cash, and the bus will go west first through Poland, up through Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, cross the border in Estonia, and then head for Moscow. And apparently, the border guards between Estonia and Russia sometimes don't even check passports. So yes, I don't think Russia's security is too tight, and I think there are Ukrainian operatives getting inside the country, willing to take delivery, smuggle in components, assemble them outside of Russian air bases, and then just continue destroying these planes. So here's some impressive losses just for the month of August. So if you remember early August, there were these 2 long-range bombers that were also destroyed by drones. There was the S-400 air defense system in Crimea, the coastal radar station in Crimea, and then these Ilyushin 76s. So just from these 4 drone and missile attacks, Russia took about $1.2 billion in military losses. Ukraine probably spent tens of millions on the drones and missiles to conduct these 4 strikes, and just these 4 strikes, $1.2 billion in Russian military losses. So let's check in with Solovyov on Kremlin State TV. I see he's still wearing his cheerleader outfit for the Central Chinese Communist Party. I'm just kidding, guys. I know what that actually stands for, but what does Solovyov have to say today?
Как это вообще все понимать? Как это все понимать? Где информация точная и ясная, идущая от разведки? Разведка вообще работает или нет? Какая разведка работает? Кто эти люди? Главное разведное управление Министерства обороны? Служба внешней разведки? Я не знаю и не должен знать. Я должен быть уверен, что у тех, кто отвечает, есть все необходимое для выполнения поставленных государством и верховным главнокомандующим перед ними задач.
I think he's starting to crack. Here's another clip from his broadcast yesterday talking about red lines, how Russian officials need to stop declaring this is a red line or else Russia will do this. He says the only messaging should be coming from Lavrov and Zakharova.
Не должно быть больше никаких разговоров. Есть красные линии, перейдут они. Нашим дипломатам надо, наконец, перестать болтать. Есть официальная позиция, которую высказывает Сергей Викторович Лавров. Есть голос МИДа Мария Владимировна Захарова. Могут большинство остальных заткнуться?
This guy needs to buy a mirror and then start shouting at his own reflection. Because he's the one on Kremlin State TV the last year and a half who's been declaring this is a red line. If they attack Crimea, that's a red line, we're going to nuke them. If they provide Patriot air defense systems, that's a red line, we're going to nuke them. If they send Leopard 2s, that's a red line, we're going to nuke them. If they send F-16s, that's a red line, we're going to nuke them. This guy's on camera. I don't think this guy believes anything he says. So let's check in with a real Russian, Garry Kasparov. What does he have to say about the situation? The worse Russia is doing on the battlefield, the more calls you'll hear from Kremlin allies, sycophants, and propagandists for fake ceasefires, concessions, and negotiations to give Russia time to rearm and consolidate to prepare a new offensive. This is what I've been hearing non-stop on social media from sycophants and Kremlin stooges in the West. We need a ceasefire, we need a freeze in the conflict, we need peace and negotiations. It's all a lie. Russia has no intention of ever stopping this war. They just want a pause and to take a breather, hoping the West in 2 years, 5 years, will lose interest, and they won't want to do this again, and they won't support Ukraine in the future. Ukraine's best chance, and the only way to have a permanent peace, is to defeat the Russians now and expel them from their territory. So here's the level of discourse and discussion coming from Kremlin stooges in the West. This guy, Jackson Hinkle, if you don't know who he is, keep it that way. But here's some of the idiotic stuff he says in support of Russia.
I think Russia should take every last square inch of Ukraine, and I think they should transfer the capital city from Moscow to Kyiv. I think that's what they should do. I mean, wow. It used to be, right? Kyiv and Rus.
Yeah.
Ukraine, Russian Empire, Kyiv and Rus was the capital city. Then it became it was St. Petersburg. It was another city, then Moscow. Why not just take it back to Kyiv? Make that the capital.
Is this guy going to be teaching history at Yale soon? Wow. But yes, this is his brilliant idea. Move the capital city of the Russian Empire from Moscow to Kyiv. These are the people in the West who support Russia. But it is important to remember what the Russians said and believed before this war. Here's a montage clip I want to share with you guys of Russians claiming that they were going to take Kyiv in 3 days or less.
В горячей войне мы Украину победим за 2 дня. Чего ее побеждать-то?
Киев будет взят так быстро? 1,5-3 дня.
2 дня, потом падение города.
Бровь поднимем, и Украина поймет все. Возьмем Киев.
Украина никогда с нами не будет воевать. Эта война продлится, Володя, максимум 3-4 дня. Там некому будет против нас воевать.
Приказ министра обороны Шойгу: 6 утра подъем, 7 утра утренний туалет, в 8 завтрак, 9:00 нападение на Украину, 12:00 обед, 13:00 взятие Киева, 18 концерт Газманова, 21:00 салют. Единственное, чего не хватает, это даты, Евгений Петрович, а в остальном, мне кажется, недалеки от истины.
Кто придумал этот тезис, что русские возьмут Киев за 3 дня? Это же мы ни разу такого.
Now, to be fair, there is no clip of Putin saying that he could take Kyiv in 3 days. Putin actually said he could take it in 2 weeks. This is a Time magazine article from September of 2014, after successfully taking Crimea and only minimal sanctions were placed on Russia in response. Yes, Putin felt pretty emboldened, he felt pretty confident. In his mind, taking Kyiv in less than 2 weeks was a guarantee. That's the only reason why he launched this war. He thought it would be easy, and he was wrong. And now hundreds of thousands of ordinary Russians are dying for his foolish war. So let's check in on the battlefield. Ukrainian forces continue offensive operations near Bakhmut, and they're advancing in the western Zaporizhia Oblast. So in the salient formed ahead of the village of Robatna, Ukraine has options. They've captured what looks like close to 8 kilometers worth of trench lines. This is the mighty Sorovikin line. And they're heading for the village of Verbova or Novoprovokivka. They've got 2 options. Russia's currently flooding in their best paratroopers to hold these 2 relatively minor villages. They're taking horrendous losses from HIMARS strikes and artillery, but we're going to know more. We're going to know a lot more about how strong these defense lines are a month or 2 from now. Also on the Donetsk border with Zaporizhia, there's this stream that Ukraine initially made a lot of progress towards, and they're still pushing. They've entered the next village, hoping to start threatening the more important village of Staromelanivka. This is again on the border with Donetsk. So with their war going so terrible and every day they're losing ground, Putin tells school children, Russia is invincible. Here's the quote that he said in a broadcast to school children across the country, "I realized why we won the Great Patriotic War. It is impossible to defeat such a nation with such a spirit. We are absolutely invincible, and we are invincible now." Has anything bad ever happened to a man who declared openly that he was invincible? But here's the truth, Russia. You would have been annihilated. You would have been destroyed by the German war machine if the United States hadn't sent you, with inflation, probably over $200 billion in today's currency worth of stuff. 400,000 Jeeps and trucks, 14,000 airplanes, 13,000 tanks, 4.5 million tons of food. So the United States and Canada, through the Lend-Lease Act, sent all of this stuff to the Russians to help them fight the Germans. On top of that, there was the British Royal Air Force and the US Air Force bombing the German war machine and their industrial capacity every single night. So no, I don't think it was your incredible spirit that made you invincible during World War II. I think it was the stuff and the help from your democratic allies. So what is Russia's core strength when fighting a war? And it's their brutal oppression of their own people and soldiers in wartime, and their willingness to sustain catastrophic losses. That is what Russia is doing today. That is what the Russians were doing 80 years ago. Here's a report. Hundreds of Russian soldiers from Chelyabinsk were reportedly locked into boxcars to prevent them from complaining to visiting officials about the theft of their supplies and non-payment of their salaries. A Russian woman who's a wife to one of these soldiers filmed a video and went on record saying that this happened to her husband and their units. Russian soldiers locked in boxcars to hide them from officials to stop them from complaining about having their stuff and salaries stolen. You're doing great, Russia. Russia removes air defense systems from the Kuril Islands. According to a Japanese newspaper, the Russian military has moved S-300 air defense missiles off the Kuril Islands. So if you're not familiar with the geography of this region, there are these 4 islands north of Japan that have been Japanese territory for thousands of years. And the Soviets, when they, as World War II was coming to an end, they started island hopping to get to the mainland of Japan. The Soviets wanted to do a land invasion of the Japanese home islands. And they took these islands and have been holding on to them for 80 years. And they just started moving military assets off the island to send them west to Ukraine, because their war is going so great. I think if something catastrophic happens to Russia in the near term, Japan should probably get these islands back. I support that. Kremlin silent on Chinese map claiming parts of Russian territory. This is so delicious. The Kremlin had not commented as of Thursday on a new map that shows disputed territory as being within China's borders, including the Bolshiye-Uralsky Island, which is shared by China and Russia. So on the map, here's where we are. This is, the outer Manchuria region. And China and Russia have had a border dispute going back forever of this island right here. What is on this island? I guess like a couple farmers and a couple farm plots. It's not too significant. But the Chinese and Russians have been disputing this, and they've had several negotiations going back to 2004 and 2008. And last week, China just said, nope, the whole island is ours. They're now drawing their border to the maximum extent of these islands. And Russia has nothing to say about it. Russia can do nothing about it. I think the expression is, if you give a dictator a piece of land, he's going to want more land. That is the lesson I learned from this children's book. And I'm sure there's lots of Chinese nationalists staring at old maps of their historical borders saying, I like what Russia has to say about respecting historical claims, restoring historical borders, taking us back to the era of empires, where if you wanted to expand your empire, all you have to do is attack your neighbor and take what rightfully should be yours. So yep, this map update I'm sure is coming soon. China is just waiting for Russia to weaken itself a little bit more. Final couple clips I have for you guys. The first one is September 1st was the first day of school in Ukraine, children going back to school, and unfortunately the air raid alarm in Kryvyi Rih went off due to a Russian attack, and all these children had to take shelter in the basement of their school. School teachers are doing the best they can. Final clip I have for you is from Nate Mook and the Superhumans Project. They're an organization fitting Ukrainian defenders with prosthetics and helping their rehab. This is a Ukrainian defender learning to walk again with his new leg. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.